thank you so much for joining and welcome to the second India Abroad Dialogue. Now, we kicked off the India Abroad Dialogue a week ago when we talked about, and the banner essentially of that dialogue was United Against Violence. It was the killing of Chandra Nagmalaya, and I think it was a very, very successful dialogue. So, we're basically starting this new journey with India Abroad, and the feedback that we got, and from the community leaders, essentially led us to having the second version of dialogue today. We had actually planned something else, but I think it was overwhelming feedback, and we decided to do this today. So today's dialogue is going to be focused, and as you've seen, is going to be on religious freedom and community security. And I'm honored to moderate this important discussion, which focuses on safeguarding rights, protecting places of worship, and addressing the threats faced by the Indian diaspora. It's been going on for some time, and I think it's a very important topic that needed a dialogue like this. So not only our community, but we also saw like there was an incident yesterday in a church, and I think it's very timely that we talk about some of these things that we are facing in the community as well. Now, we've also seen and we are witnessing, there are similar things going on, the attacks on Hindu temples, challenges to religious identity, and there are also new challenges, that are coming through legislation. So this kind of reminds us how fragile security and freedom can be, and if we do not voice our concerns, we would be looking at a very bleak future. So today's dialogue will highlight, your insights into the legislations that have been brought, so and so forth, and the ones in the past, and sort of the rise of attacks on Hindu temples, your perspectives on challenges that the community is facing in preserving and expressing the Hindu identity, and the recommendations that you guys can talk about for strengthening advocacy and ensuring safety for all. So with that, just want a reminder that this forum is designed to be non-partisan and inclusive, and our goal is to raise awareness, but also to chart constructive pathways forward together. So let me thank you all who've joined, our distinguished speakers and participants. And let me open up the forum. And what we did last time around is we went in alphabetical order. So let me quickly scan through and see who we can go to first in alphabetical order. Let's go to, and my English is poor, so let me go back and see this. ICP, T, P, S, G. Okay, let's go to Geetaji first. Geetaji, you're the first speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohitji. I agree. This is a very timely topic, and I thank India Abroad for hosting this forum. We know from Rutgers' study that when the internet is full of anti-Hindu hate memes and tropes, then violence goes up on the community out there in the real world. And then we also know from the data from FBI and from the California hate crimes that this is a very troublesome trend that's happening. So with that, I would love for Pushpitaji, are you going to make the case for the temple attacks? I know Nikunji was going to do it, but I don't see him here, but I'm so pleased to see you here.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm happy to speak. So I think this is something that's personal and professional because, I remember very clearly when the current slew of temple attacks started, because we had a few that happened in, August 22, but we kind of separate them almost because the attacks that happened on the temple in Queens, they were actually investigated and somebody was charged. So, even though it was a hate crime from, the community got some closure, you can argue whether it was adequate or not. But I think what I noticed in December 2023, there was a slew of attacks that started right here I live in the Bay Area. And the first two attacks came right there, the vandalism attacks. And I want to be very clear, we have been tracking these attacks very closely. When they began in December 2023, there were burglaries and vandalisms all mixed in. There was like a slew of them that happened. And I personally started tracking it because it was so disturbing. Our Canada team had already been tracking the temple attacks that had been happening there for about a couple of years. And every time it happened, I would be so shocked that there was a temple attack and apparently nothing happened. And then there was another temple attack and apparently nothing happened, right? And then when it started in California, it felt very personal. Right here in the Bay Area, the first two attacks, December 2023 was the Swaminarayan Temple in Newark, followed by the Sheravali Temple in January. Then we had two temple vandalisms in Sacramento and New York in September of 2024. Then we had the Chino Hills vandalism in March of 2025. This is the biggest Hindu temple in California. It's a spectacular place. I'm sure many of you have been to it. And not only is that a Hindu temple, but it also serves as a community center. It's designated as a community center in case of a, very damaging earthquake. This is California after all. None of that saved it. And then in September, then we actually had something that was a little divergent from the norm, where the temple in Utah in the Spanish Fork came under gunfire attack. Now that's different because everything else we have seen so far has been pretty standard template of vandalism. But then in Indiana, we came back to template with the Babs Temple in Indiana being vandalized. So we've actually been tracking these temple vandalisms and physical attacks. And there's also, been a sort of Sugar Land, Texas incident where a missionary group came and tried to invade the space. And I think we call these out very specifically, separately from the rash of burglaries and break-ins that also happens, only for the purposes of calling out a hate crime. Because obviously, from a attendee or a bhakt perspective, a temple attack is a temple attack. You feel violated, whether it's a burglary or a hate crime. But from a law enforcement perspective, it's extremely disturbing that there have been 7 to 8 physical desecrations of Hindu temples across the country starting in December 2023, and not a single person has been charged. And there are no investigations that are at least that the public is at least privy to, right? And I often get asked who did it, and I'm like, not the right person to ask who did it. I can speculate, but it's a speculation. It's the law enforcement people who have to tell us who did it and why. So I think in the lieu of that happening, in the lieu that nobody has been charged, it's just really, really important for the community to be aware, but also not be quiet about it.
We're at an inflection point, I think, as a community here in America, where we're obviously being attacked from both sides, from the far left and from the far right, as well as from players from the Indian diaspora itself. And there are 3 levels of what's happening. One is the generic anti-Indian, anti-Hindu hate, and those two are conflated. So when you have the anti-Indian immigrant hate, a lot of that is inherently also anti-Hindu, and you can see that from a lot of the social media rhetoric and narrative that's out there. So you have the social media hate that's kind of gaining ground. A lot of it has been created by the left, or the left has kind of perpetuated the stereotypes about Hindus, Indians more broadly, and that's now been picked up by the far right. So we see that kind of playing from both sides of the aisle, if you will. I think the second piece of it is what Pushpitaji just alluded to, which is the hate crimes, the actual acts of violence that are taking place. And I think, as she mentioned, it's important to distinguish between an incident versus a hate crime, an actual hate crime, right? A hate crime has to be motivated by some bias or animus towards the institution or the individual that the hate crime is being committed against. So that's very important to make that distinction. And then number 3 are policies, legislative policies or other agency-related policies that are being implemented or proposed at the local, state, and federal level. So you see all these 3 levels operating at the same time.
What is it that we do to deal with it? Normally what happens is there is just reactive outrage. Something happens somewhere, local people will protest against it, and then there will be some social media outrage by us, and then we will be sending WhatsApp messages, and then we will write letters, we will issue a appeal on the change.org, and then after a few days the issue is over. So we really have to think about it, that if this is that deep-rooted, that systematic, the Hinduphobia and the hate, and on the multiple dimensions of our identity that we get attacked. So what is it that we can do? What is it that we are doing beyond the reactive outrage? And the defensive posturing that we have, that we can put cameras on the temples, we can beef up security, we can get maybe higher grills, protective grills, get the FBI local agent to come and speak to us, apply for a grant, and then maybe use that money for creating this, hiring some security. Is that going to cut it? Is that going to really, it's necessary. I'm not saying it's not useful. It is necessary, it is useful, but it is not sufficient. In this age of democracy, the voice matters. But how do you become proactive, and how do you become impactful? How do you mobilize that voice, coordinate it, make collaborative and impactful, so that you can be more proactive, and then you can be preemptive, and then you can uh, you can try to stop some of these actions before it happens. How do you mobilize the society? How do you mobilize the voice of the society? And I would say that some of the advocacy organizations, Hindu Act, Hindu Action, HAF, Kona, they are doing what they can do within the resources that you have, and within the limited voice that you have, and within the limited impact that you can have through advocacy. Advocacy organizations would generally be picking up some odd issue and advocate on that.
And one of the things that we have been trying to do, and I'm sure both Pushpita ji and Samir will agree to it, and they have been doing it as much, is that we are trying to find partners at all levels, on all sides of the ideological spectrum. The places where we work, whether it is in California, on the coastlines, or in the Midwest, each one of us has a strength. And each one of us has an adjacent ally that we can gather on our side. And one of the efforts that we in Hindu Action are doing, and I'm sure Kona and HAF and everybody else is doing, is to find adjacencies of those who can align with us. It's a long and painstaking process, and a very expensive process, as you all know in this call. But it's something that we have to do, because we are the tip of the spear. There is nobody else out there doing anything.
For one reason or the other, just 5 burglaries in span of 3 days should make every community leader sit up and notice what's going on. And we have to help our temples, which are social and cultural centers for the entire Hindu diaspora. And of course, I would bring that angle. Of course, BAPS having the vandalism cases, I'm not going to go into how many, because that metrics is really frightening for us. But I'm just going to focus on California, right? The Chino Hills or the Sacramento. And of course, as Rohit ji alluded, yesterday's incidents in Grand Blanc, Michigan, also says that none of the faith-based community is safe at this point. So what I would say is there is a pause on the security grants, and very few temples are applying for that. Anyway, it's a pause. What can we do as community, as Hindu leaders, to help the Hindu diaspora, especially the temples, to be safe? As I would repeat again, Sar Salamat to Pagdi Hazar. So once the temples are safe, everything else I feel would fall into place for the Hindu diaspora in terms of advocacy and whatever we would need to do.
The issue is, law enforcement doesn't take them seriously because maybe, elected officials do not see the community as their vote bank, or, for other reasons, they don't take the community seriously. That could be the core issue, or sort of common thread between vandalism attacks and theft attacks that are going on this year. And that unfortunately leaves temples sort of vulnerable and soft target. And as Vallabhaji mentioned, we need to do something to protect them, because they are sort of torch bearers for our community and our values that we carry with us.